everyone. Welcome. It's Jennifer Menace and my husband, Tim Ryan here.
Hello. How are we today?
So excited about our show. Thank you for joining us.
Today we have a dear friend of mine, another brother in recovery, Jam Alker.
Yay,
Jam, welcome in today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're so excited that you're here.
Yeah, you've been all over the country lately and traveling and doing a number of things, and we'll get into those.
Why don't you guys kind of tell everyone how you guys, because you're really best friends.
Yeah, I've been working in the Chicago area for a number of years and had my nonprofit. And being in Chicago, you start hearing about people. And I kept hearing about this guy, Jam Alker. He's a musician. He's going into the detoxes and some residential programs and doing music. And I'm like, that's awesome. So we eventually got connected. I think you came out to Naperville and we had lunch. And we started talking and hit it off right out of the gate. And, we started working in the business together, but Jam does a lot of interesting things that I don't see people doing out there today. So why don't you start
Hold on, I got to jump in before we get into that part. I got to say, I love the conversations you guys have all the time. They talk all the time on the phone, and you guys are so adorable together. It's really cute. So I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, what's a little bit your backstory? How did you get to where you're at today doing what you do?
Sure. So, late teens, decided that my vocational choice was going to be rock star. That's what I wanted to be. So moved down into the big city and did all of the things that when you're late teens, early 20s, you think you're supposed to do as a rock star, and the things that I really enjoyed doing, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And, played it to the hilt. Had minor success, did a little bit of touring, did a lot of drugs along with it, and had a lot of fun. And when you're in that industry, we know that with addiction, usually you don't stop until the consequences are so great that you need to stop. In the music industry, those things, if they're not celebrated, they're at least tolerated, right? So the consequences,
good.
Right?
I like
Good
that.
one.
That's really good.
So the consequences weren't so great that I needed to stop. So things became more and more. My addiction manifested in lots of ways, in relationships, in girls. There was never enough attention, which I know now goes back to my childhood trauma, my mom not being around, wanting the female attention, constant, never enough. But I always was able to remain, I'd say, a functional addict or successful to a certain degree, which all that means is, if you're a functional addict or alcoholic, right, that means that you still know how to make money when the rest of your life is just falling apart.
Well, I was always told, too, take away the word functional, you're still an addict.
Exactly.
Just one that's functioning and still working and wearing the mask and
Exactly.
half-heartedly keeping it together.
Correct.
What was your downfall?
Heroin. So late 20s, introduced to heroin, thought that I would just be the next evolution of the party, and I wasn't going to be one of those guys, and I became one of those guys. And over the course of the next few years, at that point, I had built a bit of a real estate empire of my own in Chicago, was well on my way to being a millionaire, had a recording studio, had a record label, was living the life that people would think looking from the outside in would be living the dream. Miserable.
I have a question to ask
Yes.
you. I love that you said, I never thought I was going to be one of those guys, and then I became one of those guys. When did you know that you were one of those guys?
Oh, it was
Like, do you know that moment?
my moment of clarity was after the birth of my daughter, when I was sure that was going to be the thing that would get me to stop using heroin, and I lasted about 2 weeks before I was back on the west side of Chicago. But I still was not one of those guys. Just, man, there's no more lines in the sand to draw, so I've got to finally reach out for help. That was my moment of clarity. I prefer to call it that rather than a bottom. I don't usually like to talk about a bottom because it sort of implies a destination. And I've seen people who've had that moment of clarity from just waking up one day, that's enough, from getting a DUI or losing a job. Other people lived under a bridge for 10 years, and that's not been enough. So the idea of a bottom...
There's those yets. I mean, like, people, I don't
Right.
believe there's many bottoms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was sort of the moment that I knew I needed to reach out for help, but I didn't really fully accept that I was a member of the team, that I was really one of us until I went to treatment, and I was introduced to that thing that we referred to as the big book. And as I started to read it, I was like, oh yeah, that was written for me. that was clearly written for me. Yeah, that's me. And I was like,
So
wow.
how many years were you in active addiction for?
So the active addiction in terms of having to use every day, or I would be sick and unable to function, was once I was introduced to heroin. And that active addiction, aside from 2 very small periods where I was on methadone for a short period the first time and Suboxone for a short period the next time, but about 12 years I was
same
actively.
with me. That's how long I was in my active heroin addiction.
Anywhere from $100 a day to $500 a day.
I'm
of
surprised
banging
we
dope.
never ran across each
I'm
other.
glad.
did.
We probably did.
I'm
'cause
probably
glad
did.
you don't remember.
I lived on the west side. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, but the amount of work, and I don't want to say, oh, being an alcoholic, this or that, but I'm telling you that heroin or even the cocaine, it's a full-time job, getting the drugs, doing it, and trying to, you had a child and a wife and all this. So you went to treatment.
Yes. So that 10, 12-year period, once heroin took over my life and everything started to disappear, being pawned off for pennies on the dollar, I lost everything, all of my property, my music equipment, my motivation to do any of those things. I had stopped playing music. The one thing that I didn't pawn was the last acoustic guitar that I had. I kept it in my closet for about that decade. But when I finally went to treatment 5.5 years ago, I brought the guitar with me, really, truly thinking that it would be something that would maybe just help me pass the time. I didn't have any expectations, and instead, it was the catalyst that truly changed my life. Yeah.
Music's your medicine.
Yeah. So my counselor...
Did you play, though, during the years of your active using?
Almost not at all.
So you walked away from
Your dreams,
the
your love.
one thing that you loved that ultimately took you to the depths of hell, and it sounds like that one thing you loved is what ultimately brought you back to where you are today.
Very
along
much so.
with a few other things.
For sure. It all connects. The part of recovery is to talk about the vital, spiritual experience or spiritual awakening. And I always say that power greater than myself, God, whatever you want to call it, truly manifested to me through music. While I was sitting there on my bed in my treatment center with my guitar, my counselor allowed me to do some of my treatment work as songwriting. Rather than just strumming the guitar, I started to use it as a way to process all of the underlying trauma that was leading to the numbing behavior, which had then become my addiction.
Wow.
So while I hadn't found a way to be able to talk about these things that were so difficult, that caused so much discomfort that I had to numb myself, I could start to write about these experiences. So I began to write about this character of this child who went through these things, and that character obviously was me. So it allowed me to begin processing all of the underlying discomfort that had led to my addiction, but also I sat there being completely, beaten into a state of reasonableness,
Right.
completely willing to do whatever they told me. They said part of this thing is having some sort of vital spiritual experience. I opened myself up to that experience, and it truly did manifest to me and through me as music. I say it all the time, I felt like I was an old radio that was finally tuned into that right frequency, and this started to just come through me. Some of the songs that I began to write, I don't know, they didn't come from me. They came from that creative consciousness, God, that power greater than me. And so it was all of those things. It was the therapy, it was the processing, it was the spiritual experience, all wrapped together in music. And that is how I found my purpose. You were talking earlier about purpose and passion. I found that one thing, music, represented so many of the different aspects of recovery that we all know are integral to
Right.
early recovery. A spiritual awakening, processing, getting outside of your head and into your heart. And music, I found, was the way to do these things.
One thing about music, too, it's the instrumental language. I don't care. People like, what type of music do you listen to? Classical, rap, gangster rap, rock, love country. I can listen to 50s, 60s, 70s. it's all based on the mood, and everybody listens to music.
Well, it's the music of the heart. Like I remember as you're talking about this, I remember when I first heard my sponsor speak, I took her CD home because they taped it, recorded them here. And I went back to treatment and I listened to it every day like a song. And it was like the music of my heart, the language of my heart. So like you found it through that. And yet this is what you're doing. You know, I mean, it's like, it's such a magical and beautiful experience.
It's so you
in
start,
purpose.
Yeah. When I heard about you, you were Harborview and some of the local detoxes. You were doing programs in there.
Yes.
So
you leave treatment, you 90 meetings in 90 days, doing all of the different things that I was told to do, right? I shut up and did whatever they told me to do. And at the core of recovery is giving back to others, being of service to others. And I was beginning to find my purpose and realizing that this thing that I had the ability to do was a great way that I could be of service and I could give back. When I was there writing these songs, three of the guys in my unit wrote poems and brought me poems after they heard some of the things that I was writing.
Wow.
And they're like, hey, if you want to put this to music, you know,
Wow,
just
that's
a
cool.
thought. Now, in the moment, I was still in my head so early, still going through it, hair on fire, we just got starting the recovery process. I was like, no, I only write to my own stuff. But about a month later, when I left treatment, I thought about the fact that I had done this and three people, it had inspired three people to write their own poems about their early recovery. And I was like, that's it. I want to go back to treatment centers and do a songwriting workshop, show people how they can start to do this thing. And if they write poems, I'll put it to, 3 chords and a melody right there on the spot. And maybe it'll inspire them to use writing as a way to start to process their own stuff. So I started to reach out to the network of people I had at the time, and I was, blessed to be introduced to a clinician in Chicago who did groups at different treatment centers and detoxes. She was a therapist who specialized in addiction and was also a musician. She's like, let's turn it into a curriculum. I have the connections with the treatment centers. So her and I sat down and we collaborated on a 6-week curriculum based off of the songs I'd written in early recovery, where the 6th of the courses ended with me sitting down with the clients and helping to teach them how to write a song, write the lyrics. I turned it into a song right there, and we took it into several treatment centers in Chicago as well as detoxes, and just started doing it. And I was just volunteering my time. This was just overcome with passion for what this was doing for me, right? I talked about all the money I had. I talked about the fame, all the different things, autographs, being on the radio, all that stuff, still dead inside. The thing that all of a sudden was finally making me happy for the first time in my life was going into these places, watching these people who I had been where they were 6 months earlier, and seeing the spark start to ignite in them. I'm covered in goosebumps right now.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that's ever done it for me.
Because I've done a lot of, Chicago's my backyard, but I would be at a speaking event or something, I'd hear someone say, man, you ever heard of Jam Alker? I'm like, yeah, he's a really good friend of mine. Why? Well, this guy came into our detox.
I mean,
and
I've
he's
heard
the
about
one
you.
that sparked the light for me.
That's everything.
That's
man.
I've
what
heard
it's
about
all
you before I
about.
met you, like before
Yeah.
Tim. Yeah.
And
That's
you know,
everything.
Yeah.
and your journeys take, where you kind of at right now? Because then, you went from there. What did you start doing?
Well, I kept writing. I kept writing as my own form of therapy. And before long, I was like, damn, I can put an album together here. Put together a little bit of a band, got together with a producer, and made my first album. And it was shortly after that. Actually, the first place we met was I did a record release show.
Yes.
And you came out to that.
Yes.
And same deal, right? I knew who Tim was. As a matter of fact, about 6 months before that, I had called you one day. You were driving to do something. I was like, Tim, a friend of mine, gave me your number. My name is Jam. I'm doing this kind of thing. And you're like, I'm in the middle of about to do an intervention. I'll call you back. And then we didn't talk again. But then you show, it's just totally understandable and all good. And it's totally, textbook Tim Ryan. But you came out to this thing with a bunch of other, friends, associates, people that we know from within the industry. And that was the first time we met. You and I sat down together. I had a great deal of respect for what you had been doing and the work that you had done. Your A&E show had just come out. We sat down and we started talking. And I think that the reason that we connected so early on was that we noticed there are a lot of people out there who talk the talk but don't walk the walk.
Bingo.
And as soon as you and I started talking and then continue talking, we saw that we were on that side of things where we were both doing the work and really putting in the time and not just talking it, but making things happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it built from there.
It built from there, and we ended up working in treatment together, and you started getting bigger, and then I'm seeing, your band all over the country. And now I think you've got a little bit more exciting news.
Well, you have a lot more exciting.
I do
Where,
have-
where are you kind of at now, Jim?
Well, before I get to where I am right now, where's my camera? This is my camera right there. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say this with all sincerity. I would not be where I am today without Tim Ryan. There it is, right there. See that?
Wow.
For real.
Oh, he got
This
emotional.
man, I love this guy. It's
I love
the
hearing
absolute
these
truth.
stories.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't take credit. It's just doing the next right thing, and it's awesome to see people that I get connected with that become dear friends. You're like a brother to me, and
Yeah,
I
man.
love you. But to see where you're at now, and it's
Yeah.
just God working through me to work through you to
Yes,
work
sir.
here, and the doors open. But I thank you for that, and I love you, and keep doing what you're
Love
doing.
you-
'Cause
love you
it's-
too, brother.
The wave is
Yeah.
you got some really cool stuff happening.
Absolutely. The first album turned into touring. It turned into some great opportunities. The song Junkyard came out. It kind of blew up and started that career, which is crazy because my focus was completely on using music as a way to help others. I wanted to put out this album because it was in me. I had to get it out. But, God, the universe, whatever you want to call that flow had bigger plans for me. The album started to take off. I put together this band, which was originally the Alker band, but that started to feel uncomfortable and sort of like an ego trip for me to call it the Alker band when it truly had become a band. So we shortened it to the Jab, which we both know and not many other do. A little bit of double meaning in there
Yep,
when you buy a bag on the west side of a certain amount of
It's a jab you're
it's a
buying.
jab. You're buying a jab. So
See, I wouldn't know that.
right. Most people don't, but
It's
if
different
you
everywhere, but Chicago, you buy
Yeah.
other places, it's a bundle
Right.
of brick, it's a jab. But
So, and
that's-
also, a jab, and there's 5 of us, right? The 5 fingers punch
That's
you in the
awesome.
face. So there's a lot of good symbolism behind it. So the jab came together. We ended up going in July to Lexington and working with Lexington, Kentucky, worked with an amazing producer named Dwayne Lundy, who's worked with some phenomenal artists, including Ringo Starr, who we were talking
Awesome.
about a little earlier.
I remember
and-
when you were going in, you're like, yeah, Tim, I'm going to be locked down.
Yeah.
Like you were
Yeah, you
like
didn't
locked.
talk,
You
you
did not
shut
answer
down.
calls,
Stayed off of-
nothing.
it got pretty insulated for that entire month. Made a great record. While we were there, our management got us a deal with The Orchard, which is the largest distribution company in the world, owned by Sony. So we
Right
got this
on.
deal through them, which turned into more opportunities. Our first single came out last month, has done really well. The full album we put together in July finally gets released in a couple weeks on February 4th and February 5th. We start a nationwide tour.
This is so great.
that is
So where are you
phenomenal.
going to be touring? So people know where to look for you.
Sure. So we start we're going out with a band called Crowbot. The tour starts in Arizona on February 4th. Starts on February 5th. They might add a date on February 4th. But right after that, we come right out here to LA. We do a show at the Viper Room. Then we head to Vegas and Reno, then Sacramento, up the West Coast through Oregon into Seattle, Idaho, then through Colorado, down into Texas, across to Louisiana, up to Nashville, and then over to the East Coast, playing almost every night in February.
So you're doing all that in 1 month?
1 month, from February
Wow.
4th until the 29th. We're going to be on the road doing, I think it's 22 shows in 29 days.
Wow.
Or no,
That's-
26 days.
That's intense.
We were talking, I'm going to be honest, we were talking on the way here, and people look, God, you're doing an album, and you're a supermodel, and you're doing this TV show and this, and you're just Tim. But there's a lot behind the scenes that
Yeah.
people don't see.
Yes.
The phone calls, the emails. I got to talk to this producer.
early
I got to
mornings, the late
recut this.
nights.
I've got to.
The responding
it's not
to people.
all fun and games. There's a lot of work, but the reason you're where you're at is because you're willing to put in that work, because you have a foundation, because you're sober, because you still go
Correct.
to meetings.
I mean,
you
you're
still
so
help
passionate
people.
about it. I mean, just
Yeah.
having conversations with you and like hearing you, how you just want to keep helping people. But I have a question.
Yes.
With all this beautifulness that's going on in your
Mm-hmm.
life, what do you do for self-care?
Yes.
What do
Right.
you do, and how do you feel when all this greatness is coming at you?
So Those are great questions, right? I said when I left treatment, I did 90 meetings in 90 days. I was seeing my therapist twice a week. I started a meditation practice. I would go to the gym, help others, chair meetings, be of service, go in speaking, all of those things packed into my early recovery. So you do all of these things in recovery to get a life. Now I have this amazing life, and then now it becomes a balancing act. And it is very, very difficult because self-care is extremely important. I make sure that I still take time to meditate. I make sure that I take time to go to the gym. I'm not the youngest man anymore. I'm not as young as I used to be, and I'm about to do 25 shows in 27, 28 days, being in a bus and in a hotel. You guys know life on the road in a hotel is not easy.
No.
I go to meetings as often as I can. If I'm home, I have my home group that I go to. When I'm on the road, I try to hit meetings when I can, and I stay connected. Speaking with people like Tim and some of my other friends. I sponsor 2 guys.
Wow, that's so great.
It's a lot.
Do you find, though, in the midst of all the greatness, madness, all that, that you give yourself, like, even if it's an hour of downtime? Like, in between, like, a whole crazy week of all that, will you give yourself, like, oh, tomorrow I have an hour. I'll take some time and disconnect?
I'll give you the honest answer, and it's more often than not no. Because if I have that extra hour, there's always another thing to do.
See, that's me.
Yeah.
You're a lot like me.
Yeah.
Tim, there's a balance with him where he'll be like, it's bedtime. And like he has to go. And I'm like, no, I got to shuffle,
Right.
But so to know that I'm not alone is great. But to know that you can connect in that meditation or that you're sponsoring people.
Yes.
Because, a lot of times people are like, oh, well, you live this great life. And it's like, yeah, but I'm sponsoring people. What you're saying. I'm doing this, what you're doing,
Yes.
like what your answers are. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like, because seriously, it's good. It's so great. And then later on, there might be some downtime,
Well, I have this. The great thing about this situation is I now have this spiritual barometer inside of me. I've chased so many things to create that happiness that none of them did. And the one thing that does is being of service. So when that barometer starts to go off and I'm starting to feel too much depression, anxiety, negativity, I know at this point it's because I'm not spending enough time helping others. That is the one thing that does it. It is not bullshit. It sounds cheesy. I know half the time.
No, you light up when you're talking right now. You're lighting up.
Yeah.
Like,
So I know that when I'm over here spending too much time. So how do you make time to help others? How do you make time to do these things? It is essential to my happiness. It is an essential component of keeping that needle out of my arm, sponsoring guys, being there, being of service, giving to others, asking absolutely nothing in return. It's the only thing that has ever done it for me. So I have no choice but to keep doing it.
And the thing I can tell you about Jam is, he does things behind the scenes that people don't know about, and has I got to be careful how I say it because I don't. But there's a lot of people that get help between Jam and another individual he works with, and he never talks about it. He doesn't share about it. But I know what he does, and I don't either. It's
You're the same, dude.
Yeah.
You're the same.
I don't either.
You don't,
For sure.
But that's what it's all about. Jam, you need to let people know how they can follow you. If they're going to be in these towns for the tour, will you have a website? How do they find you on social media? How can they look at Junkyard Dog or Junkyard and your new video that came out?
Riot. Yeah.
Take me to the junkyard.
oh God,
Oh, wow.
I can't sing.
Yeah, you're
Jam
fine.
can sing.
Yeah, you're fine.
I'm so sorry.
Now the best way is to go to jamalker.com, and the links to all the different socials can be found from there. So it's Jam, Jam, Alker, ALKER.com. From there, you can find me anywhere. But if you Google Jam Alker, all the different links will be there as well. So just Google my name or go to jamalker.com, and you can find all the stuff for the jab as well as the work that I do in the recovery community individually outside of the band. You can find all that stuff just by going to my website, jamalker.com.
That's amazing. Can I also can we talk about what else you're working on? Because I know you've been working on your documentary.
Yeah, so there's a really, really talented director who started following me around just over a year ago. We had done some work on a previous project, so we had created a lot of content, decided that we were going to turn it into a documentary. It's finally done. We have picture lock, and now we're working on the music, which I've gotten more involved in than I wish that I had, and we're really close to having that done. So we have a documentary coming out this year. I don't have a date yet. I know we've talked about it going into some film festivals. We
Wow.
actually have a connection at Netflix that looks like there's a good chance that it could end up on Netflix
That's
as
so
well,
great.
which
That's huge.
would be pretty amazing. But my goal with the documentary really was to give it away to treatment centers. I remember being in treatment 5.5 years ago, seeing the Chris Herron story, and that was something that was very, very inspirational to me, and was the thing where, that is the kind of thing that I would like to do someday. And then, meeting you and seeing you doing some of the similar type of work, going into schools, doing all the amazing speaking events that you guys do, was very inspiring to me. So when I had the opportunity to make the documentary, the desire all along was to just be able to give it away to treatment centers, hoping that maybe it could just reach a few people and inspire them the way that Chris Herron story had inspired me when I was
Wow.
in.
So
treatment.
That's beautiful.
I'm gonna say something here, and you might get mad or not, but oh wow, you made a documentary, you made an album, you did all this. What Jam did was he actually sold his house and talked with his wife and took all the money from that to invest in himself.
Wow.
To,
Wow.
to invest in his documentary, to have his album made, to do all this. He funded all this on his own.
I'm in awe of you.
You
You
know-
inspire me, and I want to thank you for that. And I know that you're inspiring so many people right now. I mean,
Thank you.
I know your passion. I know you. And so, I know your passion. I did not know that you sold your house, though.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm, about to
But
cry.
and he did this because he had people that believed in him so he could believe in himself, to look at the bigger picture. And sometimes it's like when I called my mom and said, I want to start this foundation. Can I borrow $15,000? I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know what's going to happen, but I believe there's something. And the same with Jennifer and I. Let's just go and do this, and it's happening. And that's what it's all about. If you have somebody's watching this and they're struggling, what's a couple words of wisdom you'd leave them with, Jam? What would you say to that person that's going to see this and get hooked? And what would you say to them, man?
I think that the first thing that I like to say is that you don't have to do this alone. You don't. I know something you always say is raise your hand and ask for help, but I really thought when I was out there in it that nobody cared, that I had to figure it out all by myself, and it is just not true. Those of us who have come out the other side understand what you're going through, and something that helps to keep us where we're at is reaching out and helping people who are struggling and trying to find their way. So just know that you don't have to do this alone, and that we really, when we say we're here to help, it's not lip service. We truly are. Our sobriety, our recovery is dependent on helping the next person who's coming up. So please do reach out. It's so much better working with the community than trying to do it on your own.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's true.
Amen. We would like to thank you for coming in the studio today, Jam. It's truly an honor. We
love you.
We love
I
you.
love both
you
of
so
you.
much.
We wish you the best of luck on your tour, the
amazing.
success.
Thank you.
Please look Jam up, follow him, watch his music videos, purchase his album, follow his tour. Tim Ryan,
Jennifer Menez.
Jam Alker, we'd
Yay,
like to thank
Jam.
you.
We love
Another
you.
episode of Recovery Today. Have a good one.
Love
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks,
Amen.
guys.